Hi everybody, welcome to BI Land. In this video we are going to see 12 most used DAX functions. You will find them almost in any kind of Power BI report. Mastering only these functions, you will already be able to create decent reports in Power BI. Okay, let's get right into it. Number one most used function, as you guessed, is SUM. Let's say we have a fact table. Here I have oil statistics. In this table, I have the oil production per country. This is country code. From year 1965 up to 2020. And I have another table, which is dimension table of country, where I can know the name of the country for each country code. What I want to know now is some of the oil production per country in this period of time from 1965 up to 2020. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create a measure. So new measure. Let's call this oil production. And it is going to be simply sum of the oil production from the oil table. Close parentheses. I'm gonna put 1000 separators for the formatting and also whole number. Now, if I bring a table in my report, in this table, I'm going to bring the name of the country plus the oil production. Now I know the oil production for each country for this period of time from 1965 up to 2020. This was the first most used function in Power BI and also in many other BI tools. Let's go to the next one. Function number 2 is count. Let's say I want to count the number of lines for each country in my fact table. For example, for Algeria, how many lines I have in my fact table? It only means that in my fact table, which is the oil statistics, for each country, I have a few lines, either because I did have oil production or because I was able to study this country on a certain year, and basically there was some data. Now we want to know for each country I have how many lines in the fact table. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new measure here. Let's call this number of lines. I'm going to say count ISO number of the country from the oil table. If I hit enter, and I bring it here. Now I have roughly 56 lines for each country. Sometimes it's 51, sometimes it's only 41, 26. So only it means that for each country, I have how many lines, for how many years I was able to study this country. This is a simple count function. But what if I want to have number of lines where I have oil production for each country? For example, for Algeria, I have 56 lines that I have studied in my fact table, but I don't have any oil production for every line. So I want to count only lines that I have the oil production, right? Okay, this is going to bring us to calculate and filter functions. Basically, I want to filter the lines where this country has the oil production, right? For that, I need to filter the table oil statistics, where when I am on a certain country, it goes to the oil production column and only selects where the oil production is not empty. So how we can put this into a formula? Let's come here and create a measure. I'm gonna call this MB years this time where there was oil production, oil is produced, right? Let's say calculate. I use filter function. To use filter function, I need to put inside a calculate function. Note that we don't have to use filter function in this specific example. we could only put the name of the column not equal to blank instead of iterating via filter function. But for the purpose of learning, let's use filter function. The importance here is putting our condition inside calculate function. I'm going to calculate number of lines. So either I can use this MB lines measure that I have already calculated, or again put count number of lines. I'm going to use number of lines that I have already calculated, MB lines, and in the filter expression, I'm going to use filter my oil table. This is statistics of the oil, where my column in the filter expression, I'm going to say the oil production column, which was this column, is not equal to blank, is not blank. So I'm going to put is not equal to blank. I can't use double quotes because the oil production is in number format. Double quotes, it is text format. So I can't use double quotes, but I can use blank function. Blank function, you don't need to put any argument. It is only saying when the oil production is not blank. If I put double quotes, it will bring us error because you're comparing a number column to a text format. You're doing the comparison of the text and number. Close parenthesis for filter and then calculate. Basically, what this measure is doing, it's calculating number of lines, but it is going to filter only those that the oil production is not blank. If I hit enter and then bring it to my table here, I'm going to see number of lines where I have the oil production. For example, for Austria, I don't have any data on the oil production, so it is bringing 0, while before I had 56 lines where probably I had the oil consumption, I had other data on this country. So it is going to put empty for the lines where I don't have the oil production, right? Now I'm going to take out number of lines because I don't need any more number of lines. I need number of lines where I had the oil production. All right, let's go to our next functions, max or min. We want to know for each country how much was maximum production, right? Basically, we are going to use max function, and the max function is going to look at the oil table for each country in different years and bring the maximum of the production. So I'm going to create a new measure. Let's call this max oil production. And it's going to be simply max of the oil production, right? As simple as that. Hit enter. I'm gonna put this as whole number, 1000 separator. If I bring it here, I see, for example, for Angola, the maximum production for the years that we are studying from 1956 up to 2020, the maximum production was 1,876 kilo barrels per day. Therefore, you can do the same thing for the min function. It is going to bring you the minimum of the oil production. But let's say we don't want to show this number here. We don't want to show total line for this column and only this column. Let's say it doesn't make sense. This number doesn't make sense, for example. How we can do this using a measure? This is going to bring us to our next functions. Basically, I'm going to modify this function. This time, I'm going to say if I am on this line, total line, then show me empty or blank, but otherwise do the calculation, right? So it means that I need to use if function, right? And I need to distinguish these lines from this line. Basically, the difference in DAX language is that here we are filtered over a country. So I have filter over a country. The filter is either Angola, Australia, etc. But in the total line, I don't have filter. And that brings us to if has one filter. So I'm going to use if function. I'm going to modify this function if has one filter. has one filter is going to check the filter that we are putting in our table, which is the country, and it is going to see if it has one filter. On the first line, it has one filter, it's Algeria. On the second line, it has Angola as filter, and etc. But on the total line, we don't have any filter. So if has one filter country, this is the column that we are using here. If it has one filter, then calculate the maximum of oil production. Otherwise, show me blank, right? Basically, we are saying that if there is a filter on this column, show me the calculation, which is this calculation. But if there is not, which means that it's the total line, then show me blank. Okay, now we don't have the total value for this column. And we saw how to use has one filter, very important function, and we use it often in our calculations. Let's go to our next function. Let's say we want to see percentage of total for the oil production. It means that this number, for example, 40,700 for Angola, what percentage of the total line it represents, right? For doing this, basically, we saw that we can identify total line by the fact that we don't have the filter on the total line, as we use for maximum oil production for the total line. We said that if it has one filter, show the calculation, otherwise bring us empty. We were using has one filter. Here we can use the same kind of logic. We can identify this line by saying that we can remove the filters coming from this dimension, right? Because on this column, each country gives me filter to the oil production. When I'm on Angola, the filter is Angola, but on the total line, I don't have the filter. So it means that if the filter was coming for my measure for the country for here, I have to force to remove the filter, right? So I'm going to use a function called all. We could use another function called remove filters. Both would do the same thing. In this video, let's use all, the function that existed before remove filters. Let's create new measure. Let's call this percentage of total. What I want is definitely a division. When I'm doing percentage of total, it's basically division of the numerator and denominator. For my numerator, I have the oil production. So I want the oil production to be divided by another number, which is the total line. My total line is oil production, but removing filters that is in the visual. Calculate function. Inside calculate function, I'm still calculating the oil production, but this time I want to remove filters coming from the visual. And on which dimension I want to remove the filters, I want to remove on the country, because this is the country that gives me the filter for the oil production, right? So all function basically is saying that we are considering all of the categories, right? If I hit enter, I'm going to have the percentage of the oil production per total. This is totally all right, but we could also use variables. It's an opportunity to use variables. I'm going to go a few lines down, and here I'm going to call this variable numerator, which is the oil production, equal to the oil production. I'm going to go another line down, variable denominator is equal to from the calculate part, and then I'm going to say alt enter return, close the parentheses, return numerator divided by denominator, right? Hit enter. Now I can bring the percentage of total on this table. Let's make it percentage format. Okay, now we see that, for example, Angola, it represents 1% of the total. China, it represents 4%, for Canada, 4%, etc. Right? All right, let's go to our next function, which is SUMX. SUMX is an iterating function where it goes to each line of the table and does the calculation. In our case, let's imagine we want to do some sort of weighted average over population for oil production. This is purely imaginative situation, but just for the sake of the example, let's do it where we have the population for each country and the oil production. What we want to do is to multiply the population by the oil production and then divide by sum of the population for that country for different years, right? So it is just for the sake of the example. So we can do this. Let's come here and create a new measure. Let's call this population weighted average oil production. And here I'm going to say SUMX. We said that SUMX is going to iterate on a table where we are going to specify here, which is the statistics of the oil. And then what it's going to do is it's going to multiply population by the production of the country, this column. And then it is going to divide this by sum of the population, right, from the oil table. So as we said, SUMX is iterating over the table while sum is just summing the column. I will try to make another video to go deeper on the difference between the row context and filter context, but for the time being, you should just understand and keep in the mind that iterating functions are scanning over the table to do the calculations, right? So you need to be very careful if your formulas are going to be complicated when you're using iterating functions like SUMX and combining them with other functions that might cause performance problems, right? Because it is scanning over the table, and especially if the table is very large, then you need to be careful. But here for this kind of calculations, we are safe. As we said, this is purely imaginary. What we want to do is that we are trying to calculate some sort of weighted average over population through different years for the country. Let's hit enter. Okay, let's bring this to our table. And now we have the result, right? Let's go to our next function, which is switch. We use a lot switch in Power BI, especially when we have different measures that we want to use according to the slicer selection, right? I deep dive into this subject in another video. I'm going to put the link below. Make sure you go watch that video where I explain fully this subject with example. But here we are also going to see this briefly. Imagine I have another visual here. Let's say bar charts of the region and the oil production, right? This is the oil production. Let's move this a bit up here and here. Oil production by region. Now this is oil production, but I would like to have a slicer here saying that when I choose gas production or gas, it shows me the gas production for the same chart. For doing this, I have another table which is called param select, which is not visible in the report side. I'm going to make this visible. This is basically a data table without any relationship to other tables. And I'm only creating this table standalone saying that ID1 is oil, ID2 is gas. I'm going to put this in the slicer where I can select gas or oil, right? Again, this is explained in another video that I'm going to put the link below. Make sure to go watch that video as well. So basically what I want is to be able to bring this selection here, make this as a slicer, and when I'm choosing gas or oil, it is going to update my chart accordingly. How can I do this? What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a measure. I'm going to call this switch oil or gas, right? I'm going to use switch function. And the expression is going to be values function. Values, basically, it's going to bring the values that I have in my selection table. I'm saying that the values of the selection table, I can put ID. It's simpler. You can put selection also, but ID is just 1 or 2. It's simpler to write 1 or 2 instead of gas or oil, especially when there's the unit of the measure also. I'm going to provide the values of my selection, and here I am saying that if the value is 1, 1 means oil, right? If I select oil, it means that in my param table, it is selected 1 for the ID. If it is 1, I'm going to use oil production, right? This is the oil production. And if I'm going to choose gas, it means that in the ID it's going to be 2. I'm going to use gas production. This is a measure that I have in my report. It's exactly the same as oil production, but this time it is summing the column for the gas production, right? So basically switch, I'm giving values of my selection, and I'm saying when it is 1, which corresponds to the oil, choose the oil production, and if it is 2, which means that I'm choosing gas, then put the gas production. Hit enter. Now in my chart, instead of using the oil production, I'm going to switch oil or gas. However, because I have provided values function here, and I have said that if it's 1 or 2, I need to choose one of these selections here, like it's oil. And I'm going to actually make this slicer setting, the selection possible only for single select, right? So that I make sure that one is selected. For the purpose of using switch in this video, I'm going to use this like this, but it is possible also to parameter so that you can choose both of them, so there is no problem on that, right? My selection is now oil. I'm going to go to my chart, and instead of the oil production, this time I'm going to put the switch function here, right? I take the oil production out. When it's oil, it's giving me the oil numbers. When I'm going to choose gas, now it's giving me the gas numbers, right? Don't hesitate to go watch my other video. I deep dive into this subject there. Okay, great. Now let's look at use relationship function. Use relationship function, basically we use it when we want to activate a relationship which is inactive in our model. There are reasons that we make inactive relationships for different kinds of calculations. Imagine if you want to make a relationship but not use it except when you want to call it inside a measure. In that case, you will use inactive relationship. In our model, if we have a look, we have our oil table, but we have also two-dimension tables, year and relative year, right? One of them is active relationship, year, and the other one is inactive relationship. These tables are exactly the same thing, right? I'm going to already make them visible. They are basically copy of the year column in our fact table, right? Why we have made these tables, we want to see the comparison of the measure for two periods, right? That's why we use these two tables. So let's go to our report. I'm going to make this smaller and bring this here. Imagine I have a chart like region and the oil production, right? This is region and the oil production. But what if I want to know for, this is through the years from 1965 to 2020. I can put a dimension of year here, make it a slicer. Let's make this drop down, and also let's make it single select for the time being, right? What I want to do is to see in 2020 production in 2020. But my goal is to compare this production and see the percentage change of the production compared to another year, but the year that the user have the option to select, right? Imagine I want another year here, which is relative year, to be chosen by the user when he wants to select, for example, 2020 and compare it to 2015 or 2010 or any 2 years combinations, right? For that, I need to have two calendar, let's say two-dimension table, one of them active and one of them inactive. This is one way of doing it, right? Now let's bring our relative year here. I can just copy this, copy and paste it here. But this time I'm going to bring the year from this one, then take the other one out. And this time I'm going to use 2015. For the time being, this changes nothing because it has inactive relationship. Whatever I choose here, it's going to do nothing on none of these numbers here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create a measure. In this measure, by the way, I have made another video on this subject where I fully explain what is inactive relationship, what is user relationship, and also how we compare two time periods, right? Make sure you go watch this video. It will help you understand this subject deeply. Here we go through this quickly with the overview of especially user relationship. But if you want to understand what is the comparison between two periods, then go watch my other video. Let's say percentage change oil production. And I'm going to use variables, Alt Enter. My first variable is going to be current production. So it is just the oil production. My second variable is going to be relative. Then calculate the oil production. But this time in the filter expression, I'm going to use relationship, right? Use relationship is allowing me to use the relationship that is between the year column in oil table and also the year column from the relative year, right? Now I'm activating that relationship. But I also need to make sure that I have no filter coming from the other calendar. I'm going to use all function to remove all of the filters, or we can use also remove filters. But here I'm going to use all function to remove filters coming from the year table, right? To make sure that I am all good. And then I'm going to return. Basically, I'm going to say I want my current minus my relative divided by relative, right? This is the percentage change. If I hit enter, okay, I'm going to quickly call this relative year to make it clearer. And now I'm going to bring this calculation here. Let's make this percentage format. Okay, and now we see, for example, for Africa, we have, if we compare year 2020 to 2015, there is a decrease of oil production, right, between the 2 years. And if I change another year, let's say 2018 compared to 2015, or compared to 1972, how much oil production has been increased comparing these years. Or let's say this year compared to another year. So I can choose any combination of years to do my calculation of oil production percentage change, right? It's great. That was for 12 most used functions in Power BI. What do you think? What other functions do you use a lot in your work? Put comments and let us know. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to watch the other videos that I am putting the links below. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Hope to see you soon. Until then, take care.